Hi, welcome back to the channel We Don't Know Cars. My name is Trey, and today we're going to talk about cars. Shocker, I know. Really, more specifically, a story of a bunch of cars and a car dealership. But first, we got to start at the beginning of the story. Now, as a guy who's into cars, or really just a guy in general, you often find yourself in the middle of the night on Facebook Marketplace looking at things that you either can't afford or shouldn't buy. So I was, in a very similar situation to that here just a couple weeks ago. Now I am a collector of many things, you know, cars, plants. I like plants, among many other things. But one of the things that I absolutely love is literature. I love any physical books, or I like advertisements, anything that shows a time, but it has writing or print, something physical you can look at that takes you back in time, which is part of why I love cars so much. And it's because you can tell there's more of a story. It's not just a thought. You can see, in the colors or in the condition that, and it just takes you back physically. So that's what I love about it. So I was on Facebook Marketplace the other day, way too late, as, many are accustomed to, and I ran into some old car manuals, which is something that I do collect. I have many car manuals. I think it's awesome to have stuff like that because you often, when you buy cars, they almost never have their original manuals that they came with. And, I like cars. I like working on cars. So I like to collect them and, maybe the hopes someday that I might actually have a use for it, as well as it's just cool. So I messaged the guy about this listing of car magazines, and he had some other cool stuff in there as well, including some actual General Motors service manuals for the actual service technicians at a General Motors facility, which was pretty cool. So I messaged him, picked him up, and for a grand total of $40, got more material than I could hardly look at. He was awesome. He threw in a bunch of stuff that wasn't even in the listing. And among those things was a dealer catalog from 1977, labeled Buick. It has this glorious falcon or something across it. That I will show you now. Now, it's not in the best condition, admittedly. It's got some tears and it's been wet, but I saw this and it was absolutely striking. It looks like a piece of stained glass making a falcon or something, which I'm sure was, let's see here. It even says on the back here, Buick, dedicated to the free spirit in just about everyone. General Motors on the back here. So I thought this stuff was just the coolest as a big fan of cars and literature, especially that pertains to cars. So when going through a lot of this material, especially this Buick dealer catalog, I ran into here just on the first page a dealer business card for a guy who was selling cars, sales and leasing, Mr. Bob Succi, at a Mechanica Motors, 2260 Thompson Boulevard in Ventura, California. I'll show you that there. And that sparked my interest. I was going to do a small video on cars and the history of cars. I've been thinking about it for a couple of months now. What is it that makes cars special or something to that effect? And then I saw this. Bob Succi, Mechanica Motors, 2260 Thompson Boulevard in Ventura, California, where they sold Buick, Pontiac, Isuzu, Opel, GMC trucks as well. So they were a full service dealer. They had all sorts of stuff. And then I was like, how cool would it be if Bob was still alive and could tell us the story of what it was like to be a General Motors salesman in 1977? This book did a very good job of taking you back with all the finest interior options, all the models that they had that year. Honestly, some models that I've never even heard of before. And some of these, motors and all the stuff that they put in here, it was kind of wild, honestly. And this is one that they would, if you were looking for that, just the right one, they would hand you this in the dealership and you could look. They got every option from power steering to every different engine and transmission option you could get, a Buick Electra, which I have never heard of. La Sabre, we know that one. You could also get let's see here, an Estate, the Electra, or the La Sabre in a wagon. That's exciting. The Century and Regal, which I'm familiar with. And then there was one that I've never heard of before, the Buick Skyhawk. Maybe y'all know that one, but I didn't. Thought it was quite interesting. They featured it in yellow. Very sporty of them. But it was just fascinating, and I thought to myself, maybe I could call Bob. Wouldn't that be fantastic? So the first thing I did was start with the dealership, Mechanica Motors in Ventura, California. It sounded, very like a place you'd want to buy a fancy Buick. Very high class sounding. So I started looking, and I plugged in the address, and the first thing I found with the address on Google was that it is no longer a car dealership and is in fact a CVS pharmacy. That's not very exciting, and I thought, well, maybe that's the end of that. Also, if this guy was selling cars in 77, is he even alive? Well, to those I wouldn't know, I got kind of discouraged after seeing that the dealership didn't exist anymore and not finding a whole lot of service information on it on the internet, that I put it on the back burner for a week or so, and then I ended up having a vacation, which was nice, and I took some time on my vacation in Florida, visiting my father, to do some more research, to dig a little deeper. With the internet, you can pretty much find anything that ever was or ever will be. So I plugged in Mechanica Motors in California and did searching, and several pages later ran into some obituaries of people with the last name of Mechanica. So with that, I found a John R. Mechanica. That was the first obituary that I discovered, with the date of birth being December 5th, 1916, and the date of death being September 19th of 2014. In the obituary, I went on to read, longtime Ventura resident John Robert Mechanica passed on September 19th in 2014 in Cold Spring, Kentucky, after living 97 happy years. John was born on December 5th, 1916, in Lucelin, Saskatchewan, Canada, to John Banker and Helen Jane Williams Mechanica. And it goes on to explain his surviving family, as well, as a few other mentions. And then it starts, John arrived in Ventura in 1929, when his father, the late James Banker Mechanica, opened a Shell service station and GMC truck dealership on the corner of Evergreen Drive and East Main Street in Ventura. Prior to the Second World War, John worked at the local Bank of Italy in Ventura. Later, the Bank of America in 1938. And then after the car agency moved in to the intersection of Seward Avenue and Thompson Boulevard, John was a sergeant in the U.S. Army and served at Pearl Harbor shortly after the December 7th attack in 1941. And his brother Charles his brother Charles was also in the armed services. We'll get to that as well. They, once the war was over, John and his brother Charles started work at a car dealership. And they named it Mechanica Motors, Inc., with a Pontiac and Buick franchises added to the dealerships later. It became a Midtown Ventura fixture and remained such until the dealership closed in 2004. John also became involved in other businesses where he excelled, including the development of farming property and so on and so on. It goes on to say that John was a large member of his community church and was really just a big part of the Ventura community altogether. So this was it. I had been looking for Mechanica Motors and couldn't find anything on it, and here it was in a long forgotten obituary. Probably not read since 2014 when it was published. How fascinating a story. And the story gripped me. Really, it did. Because I had already had on my mind a story of why cars were important, and then here it was, a family success story, a true American success story, from a Shell gas station and service station that sold GMC trucks to an entire family run dealership for a very long time at that, from 1938 all the way up to 2004. Now, there are dealerships out there that have run much longer, including some local dealerships to me, but this struck me as very interesting and told me there was more to the story, you know? So I kept looking for information and didn't find, honestly, too much more about the dealership. I found a picture from a newspaper on a Facebook group about Pontiac dealerships, and I will post that here for you now. That was quite cool to see. I did end up finding another obituary for the brother Charles, and I'll read that to you here shortly as well. Now, doing much more looking for Mr. Bob Succi, knowing that the owners of the dealership had been gone for some time now, I figured maybe there was a chance that Bob was still alive. Well, it wasn't until going through many, many more pages on Google till I found an obituary for Mr. Bob Succi out of a Madison. Let's look here. Out of. Maybe I don't have it. Well, I think Massachusetts, if I'm not mistaken. And the obituary read a lifelong, piece of the community, very similar to the story of John and his brother Charles. Bob was a kind of a staple of the community, and he worked at a Pontiac Buick dealership in this town in Massachusetts. Um, Now, I could not find any connection to this Bob and Mechanica Motors in California until a brief mention of a Bob Succi in a Facebook comment on a, I think, Madison, Massachusetts historical forum on Facebook, in which there was a kind of a head guy of that group, and I messaged him and said, "Does this Bob Succi have any connection to Mechanica Motors in Ventura, California?" He said that yes, he did. Now, while I can't confirm that I'm talking about the same Bob, either way, I would like to think that yes, probably, being that he ran a Buick and Pontiac dealership in Massachusetts, maybe he did some training or something at this Mechanica Motors in Ventura, California. I'm not sure. But this whole story led me down a different path for this video I had been thinking of. Not why are cars important, but something bigger. Why do we consider physical attachments to this history so important? And it's because of all the stories that go along with them. Now, I found an obituary, but without this book right here and that business card, I would have had known I wouldn't have known anything about this dealership in California, or its impact that it had on its community, going as far as being mentioned in a Hot Rod magazine article. Yeah. So, Silent Flight is the name of the article from Hot Rod magazine mentioning this Mechanica Motors. Originally published in the March 1978 issue of Hot Rod magazine. John Thawley's 77 Buick Skyhawk proves hotting isn't dead, just gone to hot air, hot flares, and hot stares. If you count yourself among the hot rodding faithful, the name John Thawley should elicit fond memories of a not only Hot Rod magazine staffer who kept his copy short, to the point, and devoid of horseshoes. Thawley has always found a way to put together an oddball project which ultimately went as well as it looked, and at a price that didn't bring an unbelievable look on the face of your banker. Now, we're not implying that John's latest go-around is super low buck. It isn't. But ex-TV announcer from Austin, Texas has spent a considerable amount of his own time, talent, and legal tender assembling a rod-based alternative to today's ecology economy crunch. It's the 70s, we need more efficient vehicles, after all. Way back in April of 77, Thali decided that what today's rod enthusiasts needed was a piece based on today's technology, enclosed in today's tin, with a slight addition of glass. I know lots of rodders who aren't caught up in the early iron thing. They like the accoutrements of late model thinking. So what I did to assemble a package that reflected good performance tied to a modern looking, easy to buy, relatively affordable package. My choice, with a few modifications, which we'll be covering, was a Buick Skylark. So Long John slipped by Mechanical Motors in Ventura, California, a thriving beach city located 80 miles northwest of Los Angeles and laid out along the long green for this era of limitation specials. Included in the dealer's stock envelope was a 231-inch V6 odd fire, AM FM heater, full air, power brakes, steering, tilt wheel, Saginaw 4 on the floor, and a 321 posi. I mean, we don't want today's car freaks going without creature comforts. Gotta have the radio, gotta have the AC. So the article goes on and on about all the modifications that John Thali made to his Buick Skylark, and then goes on to mention a Skyhawk and some of the other features that they were offering at the time. Very, very classic Hot Rod magazine. Here's the year, here's some of the cool models, here's what you can get, so on and so on. But there it was, again, mentioning what a staple of the, town this dealership was. And from what I could tell based on the obituaries, that it very was a staple. Now, I unfortunately, of course, can't get a hold of any of the original members of this dealership. I did find a phone number for the grandson or son of either John or Charles. I couldn't quite put that together. We'll try to call them and see what they say. If I can get them on the phone and they agree to being on the video, I will include that audio here. If not, I'll just add some notes. If I can't get a hold of them, well, it's not too surprising. The information that I found indicated that they are in their 70s and honestly may no longer be with us as well. It's very possible that all that remains of the Maconica family is distant and, detached from the legacy that they once put out in this coastal town in California. Now, moving on from Mechanical Motors, we get into the more meat and potatoes and the deeper dive into what it all means. Now, I thought it was just fascinating looking at all the pictures and the options of these cars, and in many of the other books that I found, some of which had the original build sheets to vehicles that are probably long gone. It had me reflecting on my own experience with vehicles. Now, if you've watched anything on this channel, you know I own a 1995 Toyota 4Runner that I absolutely love. I've had the thing apart a couple of times now and will unfortunately be having it apart again shortly, as I do believe it may have dropped a valve or something. It's quite unfortunate there. But it doesn't deter my love for the vehicle. And it's not just the vehicle, but what I've done with the vehicle. Now, admittedly, it was not my first car. I'll put pictures of my first car up now. See, my first car was a 1985 Pontiac Trans Am that I built with my father, being I was around 8 years old and my dad did most of the building himself. But I loved that car. I would spend countless hours sitting in it in the garage, just dreaming about the days that I got to drive it. And I'm sure you all have, many such stories. And while I don't have as many memories with that Trans Am, or even have the Trans Am at this point. I do have my 95 Toyota 4Runner, which took me through high school and everything in between. Now, I remember when I first got that car. I had been looking for cars. My dad said, I'm going to buy you a car, because he had recently, in the last couple years, gotten rid of my Trans Am. That was, of course, supposed to be my car. Things happen. Life gets in the way. The car ended up needing to be sold. So he told me he'd buy me something if I wanted to do some looking. So I was looking and looking. My father worked at a local car dealership, and they had this absolutely gorgeous 1986 IROC with a crushed orange velvet interior, T-tops, and the works. This thing was gorgeous. And I saw it and immediately messaged my dad. Dad, come on, let me get this. And he said, oh, I don't know. Let me talk to the guys at work. It happened to be at the dealership he worked at. So let me talk to them and we'll see what we can do. He comes home and he says, they want too much money for it. And I'm like, oh, come on, Dad. Please, please let me drive this absolutely bitchin' ride to school every day. And he said, I'm sorry. It's too much money. Keep looking. So I kept looking and just nothing was really suiting my fancy. I wanted something old, something that brought me back to working on that 85 Trans Am with him. Although I, again, didn't do too much work. I just wanted to bring those memories back. And I knew my car was long gone. But maybe I could have something else close to it. Well, life goes on, and one day, Dad shows up and he says, I bought you a car. And I'm like, oh, okay. So he gets home from work, and I go outside, and there it is. This beautiful white 95 Toyota 4Runner. Spray painted black wheels, and, looked the part, And I was like, huh. I had never even looked at one of these before. I can't say I knew what a Toyota 4Runner was. But here I was, 15 and a half or so, and honestly excited. I had a car, I could say that much, and I looked forward to getting to drive it. Now, I didn't have my license quite yet, so there was no driving it alone for me. He took me around the block and got to experience it for the first time, and I was just in love from the moment I sat in that car. Not only was it bought for me from my dad, which of course made it special, but I could tell that me and this car were going to get along very well, just for whatever reason. Sometimes you have that kind of a reaction to things when you see them for the first time or sit in them, especially cars if you enjoy, if you're driving them, or even a bike or anything. You've sat down and thought to yourself, this is going to go well. And well, 6 months or so went by and I finally got my license and I started driving it every day to school. And everyone at school was like, wow, what a cool car. And I was like, you think so? I'm like, it's just a old SUV. But everyone loved it. It was awesome. And I loved it because I could go anywhere in it. You know, these guys, everyone else was starting to get their cars too. And, people at school wanted to go out where I live. In the West, we have a large public lands that's just desert. You can go four wheeling and off roading and stuff. And people from school wanted to go out and have fun or do bonfires or whatever it may be. And I could do it because I had 4x4, and an SUV that could get me anywhere. It was rugged, you know. And it wasn't long after I got mine that many of the other guys at school started showing up with Toyotas. First, my good friend Sam with his 1994 Toyota 4Runner, red at that. My friend Alex drove his dad's T100, also 4x4, of course. And then Cameron with his Tundra, that was early 2000s. And then a few other people as well. I ended up starting a following at school of Toyota SUVs and trucks. And that's when I learned of the reputation of a Toyota, and it just furthered my bond with this vehicle. And then all the memories that I was making at the same time. Every time I got in it and started it up, I sat in a vehicle that I knew would never do me wrong, that it would get me anywhere as long as I would get it there. And if I were nice to it, it would be nice to me. It was quite different. And it started me on a different path. I went from someone who, I rode dirt bikes, I had worked on cars, I enjoyed mechanical things, to someone that would be classified as a car guy. I began to just love everything cars and automotive. I really began taking dirt bikes very seriously and rode those, been riding dirt bikes for many years, and I came close with that and was taking stuff apart and was fixing my own car and doing things to other people's cars, and it was great. And it just unlocked this whole culture of, you know, car people, and that's when I realized how important this stuff was. It was different. Why did it matter so much? And there were lots of people that were like, it's just an old truck, right? It's really not that important. But it was important to me. And the first time that it broke, I'll never forget, everyone was telling me, you've had a good run with it. Just get rid of it. It blew a head gasket, which, if you know anything about those Forerunners of that era with that 3-liter V6, it's a very common problem for them to have. So it blew a head gasket, and, well, I had done one before at this point. I had bought one with a blown head gasket just to see if I could do it. I did it successfully the first time, and I knew it was going to be expensive and it was going to take me a long time, but I could do it. Luckily, I had, things aligned, and I had other vehicles to drive that I could let my baby sit up for. It was a little over a year, unfortunately, till I had the funds and everything put together to do it. And I did the work, and it failed miserably. If you've seen my full-length head gasket video, you know why that is. But I saved up money again until I had the proper amount of money to do everything correctly with the correct parts, and I did it. And the car has been great for the last couple years since I did that. Of course, full video in the link in the description if you want to check it out. It's been great since. Unfortunately, again, as I mentioned earlier, it has had some mechanical failures as of recently. I'm still not 100% sure what's wrong. All I know is there's some junk in the number 5 cylinder. So I'll have to take that apart at some point and figure it out. But that's okay, because I love it, right? Because no matter what happens to it, with it are all the memories that I made in it. Now, I'm no fool, and I know you can't keep everything forever, and all legacies fade, even those of a grand dealership in California that once serviced that coast and much of LA with the newest, baddest General Motors vehicles that were out there. They all fade away eventually, but while you're young and alive, why not cling to legacy and show people and, hold on to something so that in your later life you have something to show people? Because I'm a great believer, and at the end of life, all you have is what you've done and where you've been, the people that you've met. Part of what your impact on this earth is the memories you made with yourself, but with others. The memories you helped other people build. When they look back and they remember, oh, that guy and that car, or that car that guy was always working on. He loved that. And even when it was broken for a year or more at a time, he always got back to it and got it running. Because it brought him joy. Those are the kind of legacies that you leave behind, and that's what's so special about cars. Now, I've been rambling for a while, and many of you are wondering if I'll ever get to a point. Well, maybe there is no point, I don't know. But if you're watching this video and you've watched this far, it's because you've had something special like that. A car, or, a house, or maybe even a piece of furniture. In this specific video, obviously, the connection is vehicles. I have other things that, mean something to me. But nothing so much as a car. Cars you can take anywhere, and they can take you anywhere. Now, you may have that heirloom desk, or that plant that's been in the family for a long time, or that house, but the house doesn't move. The furniture can go with you, but it just sits. You may use it occasionally, but it collects dust. There's nothing so unique as a vehicle. Because even when it doesn't run, you can fix it. Even if the engine's bad, you can repair it or replace it. And even when it sits for 20 years, you can get it back on the road and take it anywhere you want to take it. And that is what's special about a vehicle. When you're driving that car that your dad bought you when you were young, 15 and a half, and you look in your passenger seat and you remember the look on his face, the look of pride, maybe a little bit of fear, as you take this new to you car around the block for the first time. And your dad knows that you're growing up, and so do you. But you're going to do it with this. And you can look back and remember all those times that you had in that vehicle. And think, this vehicle had a whole life before me. A whole 20 years before me. But now it's your turn to build memories with it. It doesn't forget the memories that it had before. And if you're fortunate enough, you may figure those out. Whether it be an old sticker, or something you find in the glove box, or maybe a build sheet and a manual that you found on Facebook Marketplace. Whatever it is, you unlock the memories that this vehicle made. And with it, a piece of humanity. For it's only a vehicle made of steel and rubber. It simply has a mechanical motor. It doesn't feel, it doesn't hurt, but with it, some of the most human things that you've ever experienced. And that, right there, in essence, is what is special about cars. Now, I'll stop rambling, because surely I'll begin repeating myself. But with this video, I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you watch it all the way through, and I hope what it does for you is cause you to look back in time and think about some of those memories that you've made. And the next time you go get in your, maybe your 90s ship box, or your classic car, or even something new, maybe you look in the passenger seat and remember who sat in that seat before. The conversations you've had and the places you've been. Let it be cause for reflection. Let it bring you to maybe a better time, or worse, because they're all important. See, because at the end of it all, when the curtains close on this wonderful showing that is life, and the lights go out, all you have is what you've done, where you've been, the memories that you've made, and the impacts that you've had on those around you. So, let that vehicle be the item that brings you back to those memories and gives you a little bit of humanity back in this world that seems to lack it every day. Let it remind you of some of the legacies that maybe once were yours or once were others. And remember that which may be forgotten to time, so that it may be forgotten no longer. Thank you guys for watching. I do hope you watched all the way through. My name is Trey with We Don't Know Cars, signing off. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.